Thanks everyone, and very warm welcome. So as we've mentioned before, we're going to be doing the main bulk of the session is going to be the deep dive with cash. So we've got very happy to have Maja here, who's our senior advisor for cash for the Africa region, as well as did I get your title wrong? Sorry.
That's okay.
Cash guru, cash wizard. Is that
Regional
better?
cash coordinator.
Queen of cash.
Queen of cash. I'll take that.
I think Queen of Cash works. Yeah. Okay. So we've got Queen of Cash, Maja, joining us today, and as well as cash focal points from across the region. And we're going to be doing a sort of what is cash, what is CVA session with the CEA team, and then we're going to be diving into some of the cash and CEA tools that Maja and Liz particularly have been working on. So thanks, and over to Queen Maja.
Thanks. That's lovely. I wish that sticks. Liz, did you join? Did you merge our presentations, or do you want me to just present?
No, I didn't merge. I'll just go through the checklist. So I didn't do a presentation.
Okay. Yeah. No, that's fine. Let me just get it up. So just maybe to add a bit of context for this, we have the cash roadmap. That we did with national societies by the end of last year and into this year, where the idea was to get national societies to identify where do we want to go with cash in 2022, and for us to get input for the longer term cash roadmap. And one of the things that came up as a priority was to strengthen the quality of CEA in CVA, and this came very timely with Liz and the CEA team working on this CEA in CVA checklist. So I think this is a really good opportunity. We wanted to do it with our IFRC focal points and facilitators first, so that we hopefully can rely on you guys bringing this forward into, we have the cash communities of practice, and you have your direct work with the national societies as well, of course. So hopefully we'll also be able to sort of make the bond here between the CVA and the CEA focal points that we have out in the offices. So I promise to just give a very quick intro to cash and voucher assistance, just making sure that all our CEA colleagues understand what it is that we're trying to do with the cash. So I'm just going to do very briefly a theoretical introduction to it. So as you see here, we have a quote on the screen, which is the CALP, so the Cash Learning Partnership or Networks definition, which is agreed upon by all actors. It is to use cash and voucher assistance, not cash transfer programming or cash-based programming or whatever. So CVA is the official term, and it refers to all the programs where we either use cash or a voucher modality for goods and services, and we give the cash or the voucher process for them to go and buy what they need, with the focus on individuals, households, and communities. So when a government or a state actor is getting a cash grant, for example, from another government or bilateral funding, that doesn't count. So it's all about what we put into the hands of people directly impacted by crisis. Just a very brief on some of the needs that we see that we can meet with cash and voucher assistance. Of course, in the Red Cross Red Crescent movement, a lot of what we do is basic needs, really focusing on food. So we have all kinds of food commodities, and if we give people cash to go and buy what they need, we do see that they also prioritize to buy fresh food and other types of protein. We can give access to clean water, to sanitation items, hygiene items. We might see people spending money on school fees or school supplies. We use cash in shelter programming for both rent and for shelter items. If we have a multi-purpose cash grant, we also see that some people might prioritize to buy medicine, clothes and shoes, so like very normal items that people need. Beyond drafts, we also see a lot of livelihood support. So seeds and tools, a very common one, fishing gear, but increasingly we're also seeing cash used, for example, to support income generating activities. Cash for labor is also a thing. So for example, if we're doing a cash for shelter program, we would include a labor cost into that. And we can give people cash to access various services. So it can be health services, it can be access to transport to go to some kind of service that they need, which is also very common that people spend the cash like that. And then this is the controversial one, just to challenge it a bit, the idea. So very often when we find people in crisis, we also have to recognize that they might have needs that go beyond just basic needs. And we have to accept that maybe a very small proportion of the cash is actually spent on, for example, women doing each other's hair, or a man or a woman, could also be, often men, that they buy cigarettes or whatever other social expenses might be there. So this is just to say that it might be that we see people buying a little bit beyond what we anticipate that they would go and buy. And this is very often because it has like a psychosocial benefit for them. And as long as it's like a 1% or a tiny component of the cash that we distribute, we need to accept that people have those priorities. So very rarely we respond to all of these things at the same time, but we might have, as I said, a multi-purpose cash grant, which is set with a value on the basis of the minimum food basket. And maybe if it's a context where people need to buy water, for example, coming by a donkey or another type of water trucking, we would include that. And then we might have these one-off grants for a shelter distribution or for livelihoods or something like that. So it depends on the crisis and the context, specifically what we are building into that cash grant that we are giving people. And what's really, really important to remember in all of this is that cash is a tool. Cash is not a sector. It's not something standalone. So it's something that is being used in combination with other activities. So I think most of you know from looking through DREFs and EAs, for example, or other projects, that we typically have cash as a component that sits within a larger response. So sometimes we have that multi-purpose cash box on its own, but then we still say, well, remember, if the intention is that people are going to invest in livelihoods, you still need to include those activities that inform them of how are you then going to engage in livelihoods, and how are you going to access the cash, and how can you go to the market, and all these sorts of things. So it's never a standalone thing. It's one way to deliver assistance. And very often we also see cash being distributed in a combination with, for example, an in-kind modality. So as I said, it can be a means to multiple ends. It can be used across different sectors. Currently, lots of basic needs, livelihoods, shelter in the movement, but we do have global working groups that are working on seeing it as a thing that can be more integrated into WASH and health programming as well. So I think that will be really interesting to see how that develops. And then another thing, just bringing up that we need to remember, and I'm sure as the CEA specialist, you are very aware of this, that we need to pay attention to some of the risks that come if we are not coordinating our approaches to cash. So tensions within or between communities, CEA incredibly important in those aspects as well, to make sure that we understand what else is going on and that we mitigate this. We might not have the same effectiveness or efficiency of our programs if we are duplicating what other actors do. And we might actually create or expose people to protection issues. So yeah, this is just very, very fast. Usually a training would, of course, dive into what some of these risks are and the mitigation measures. So that's something to pick up on. Hopefully, I know for some of you, you already participated in cash trainings in some of your context, but very good if we can get the rest of you on those trainings as well. Very quickly, I think this is my last slide. Let's see. Just on, we say cash modality and we say cash delivery mechanisms. So just again to highlight, we have our overall objectives So either meeting basic needs, lots of that in our drafts, or sector-specific cash, or multi-purpose cash, which will come later. And this can be delivered either through a cash transfer, meaning that people get actual cash that they can spend freely. So we always say that cash transfer is the preferred modality because that's where people are allowed the most free choice. And we see that as the most dignified approach. And then we have the voucher. So a voucher can be two things. It can either be a value voucher, meaning that they just have an amount that they can then go and spend maybe in different stores and still somehow buy according to priorities, but it would always be quite restricted in terms of how they can, in terms of what they can buy, because it depends on who we have contracted. A commodity voucher, I generally don't consider a cash modality because it just means that we put on a either electronic device or a piece of paper that they can go and buy, for example, 50 kilos of maize. So we're basically just asking people to pick up the in-kind items at a shop instead of a distribution site. We see these modalities being delivered through different mechanisms. So now I'm just putting a bit of the cash language in because we also have some of it mentioned on the checklist, and it's generally very good to know. So cash transfers either through electronic cash, so mobile phones, bank transfers, maybe we have like a point of service terminal where they can go to different stores as well and cash out. Or you have direct cash, meaning that we as the organization are distributing cash on a distribution side and like giving it out to people. Sometimes we bring a financial service provider to the distribution side to do it for us because it's a very good risk mitigation measure. But ideally, in context where it's possible, we go with an electronic cash modality. And we see a lot of mobile money in Africa right now, which is a very good step if we, of course, ensure that everyone has safe access to it. The vouchers can come either in a paper modality or an electronic voucher modality. So we see a bit of this, but not too much. The setup is very often much heavier when we are looking at the voucher modalities. The cash can be conditional or unconditional, meaning whether there is a prerequisite or a qualifying condition for people to get cash. So it could be that we ask mothers to participate in a training on nutrition, and on the basis of that participation, they get access to the cash. So they're targeted already, we know what we're giving them and so on, but there is this qualifying condition. Cash for work is another type of conditional cash program where people carry out a day's or a week's or a month's worth of work on, for example, community projects like building a dike or cleaning a road after a landslide or whatever. And then on the basis of that, they get a cash amount. We generally try not to impose too many restrictions. We see more unconditional cash because a qualifying condition very often excludes specific groups, and often it's also not necessary. And then we have the restrictions and restricted and unrestricted cash. So this is related to how people spend the cash that we give them. So the voucher modality will always be restricted in some sense because we have to contract certain vendors for people to go and access the items that they need from those vendors. But we might have a lot of vendors contracted, or we might have contexts where it's more like a supermarket where you can access everything. And then, of course, the restrictions might be not so heavy, but there is always the risk that people cannot get what they need. Like if it is a supermarket, even though they might have everything, maybe they don't have medicine. So people would still need to buy something that they then sell at a low price to then get cash to go and buy the medicine. So we always have to pay attention to how differing the needs are for affected populations. And then ideally we go with an unrestricted modality. So through either the electronic and direct cash, so people can buy what they need. We often see soft restrictions, meaning that we do give people, for example, mobile money, but with the expectation that they would spend the cash on food or on shelter. And then we build in like awareness raising activities on that to try and sensitize them to buy according to our expectations. But if they don't, we can't really go in and stop them, because we have decided still to give them an unrestricted cash modality. And then, as I said, multi-purpose cash grants or cash assistance is really, that's a key priority. So we see that more and more, and it means that we are trying to cover more than just the basic needs. We are ensuring that all those other needs that can be met, either through whatever is available in the markets or whatever services might be available and come at a cost for people, that those amounts are factored into the cash assistance that we give people. And then, of course, we could talk in length about how to set the transfer value and how many installments or tranches of cash that we are giving people. But I'll refrain from that here, because I don't want to spend too much time on that. But often we see, again, the draft basic needs programming is 1 or 2 months. Emergency appeals might have a longer trajectory where people get cash every month for 4 or 6 months. And then we have the more advanced programs. So, for example, we have Nigeria and the team from there joining us now, and they are actually having a cash program that are targeting mothers for like cash for buying more nutritious food for 10 months, I think it is, again based on how much money they're getting in. So we see a lot of different designs, and maybe most importantly, the CEA is of course the really important aspect to consider when we are doing our design, because that's where we get to know from people how we can design programming according to their needs and priorities. And one more slide. It's just very quickly, because I think you will see on the CEA in CVA checklist that this will take us through, that a lot of the CEA things, it's not different for cash and voucher assistance. We might have stricter requirements for including CEA. We really don't want to see any cash programs being implemented before there, for example, is a complaints and feedback mechanism in place. We need to have feasibility studies that show people's priorities and whether they have a preference for cash or vouchers or in kind before we just go in and deliver cash and so on. And a few other things that I just wanted to point at, which might be a little bit different when we look at a cash program, is for FSPs as financial service providers. So for financial service providers and traders to be trained on CEA, ensuring that they respect diversity and treat people equally. So these are new actors, right? It's private sector actors that we are working with. So we, of course, have to make sure that they understand what is our whole project, because they are not necessarily usually engaged in humanitarian programming. We need to consult targeted households on who to target as the primary recipient of cash. So meaning the one that is registered on our books and is the one to come and collect the cash. And this is for the reasons of, for example, people facing risks in going to collect cash at a payout point, unless they have it like on a mobile phone. But it could also be household level conflicts. There are studies from different countries saying that women, who we often have as our priority target group, they don't necessarily always want to be targeted, because they say, well, my husband is so used to being the income earner, so if I'm suddenly the one getting the cash support, he might be conflicting with me rather with the organization. So there's a lot of dynamics in this. We make sure that we look into it. Very often we use proxies in our targeting. So for example, people living with disabilities or elderly people might assign either a household member or a close friend to be the one to go and collect the cash. But we very often see that maybe they don't get all the money back, or that there are other issues coming out of using proxies. So if that is the case, then we need to make sure that we are still communicating directly with the with the person who was intended to receive the cash. We have to consider digital and numeric literacy levels and how we can support people to, for example, access mobile money for the first time in their lives or access a bank for the first time. They might not know or have been exposed to this before. So super important that we consider that. We have to monitor and engage around the markets and the financial service providers. So often we have volunteers stationed during the times when there's cash distributions. And then, of course, we also have to make sure that traders and financial service providers also have a voice and that they can state their feedback to us on the program. And then finally, make sure that there's strong linkages to our PGI colleagues. And this we will discuss maybe a little bit more at the end of this meeting. All right, so that was it very quickly. I hope it gave you somehow an overview. We'll share these slides so you have them. And then at the end, I have included a few links. So into our community of practice that we have online for the Africa Cash National Societies, where there is an overview of trainings that we recommend on cash, and then into the community of practice in general, where you'll see different tools and hopefully we'll be able to also upload or at least link directly to this checklist that we're discussing today.